Earthquakes. Israel's Arab parties splitting in a plus for Netanyahu. Israel's COVID-19 vaccination program is curbing the pandemic. President Joe Biden to end U.S. support for Saudi Arabia and Yemen. The Iran Nuclear Deal, with Iran now responds saying they may void the agreement altogether. And what's this about the Locusts now having increased swarms in Aromia? Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, Brother Wayne here from Alabama. This channel is all about world news and how it correlates to biblical prophecy. Well, welcome. Today is Thursday, February the 4th. Well, if you're new to this channel, I would strongly urge you to subscribe to receive daily news updates on what's going on in the political and how it is impacted in the spiritual. Well, let's jump right into the Bible verse of the day. Today we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And beginning in verse 1. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. And then in verse 2. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. You know, when we sit back and we look at it, no matter what you're doing in life, no matter where you're at on your journey to God, we have to have the end goal in mind. So I'm going to ask you today, what's your end goal? Are you wanting to your end goal to be heaven? Or really, are you looking at temporary end goals such as monetary items or just kind of items such as a home or a car, or maybe your end goal is to reach that new promotion or reach a certain social status? Well, I want to be the first one to tell you today that the author and finisher of our faith is Jesus Christ. So in Jesus, when he said it is finished, when he was on the cross and he said it is finished and took his last breath, he paid the payment for all of our sins. And so what is your finished goal? When you run your race here on earth, where are you trying to end up? Are you trying to end up in heaven? Are you really focused on just kind of temporary rewards that are here instead of the great and amazing rewards that are for us in heaven? So I really hope that that speaks to someone today, because that really hit me so hard because of sitting back and looking at all the things that are kind of going on in life now, just kind of chasing the daily nuances, that really kind of having the proper perspective of we're running this race for eternity to be with Jesus Christ, the author and finisher of our faith, who sits at the right hand of God. So let me bring encouragement to you today that keep your eyes focused on Jesus and all will be well with your soul. Well, let's jump right into the earthquakes today. And previously I've talked about that when you see low numbers of earthquakes, the pressure is building. And right now, in the last 24 hours, magnitude 2.5 or greater, there have been 30 earthquakes. That is tremendously low. Remember, anytime we see anything really 40 and above, 40 to 45, that is low. And when you start dropping into the 30s and even into the high 20s, as it was earlier today, it's really something to watch. So we are now on a major earthquake watch for the next, I would say, 24 to 48 hours. So just something to keep of note. And now a couple of major earthquakes I really want to just bring to your attention was a 5.7 southeast of the Loyalty Islands, right off the coast of Australia, really toward the east. You look at that, and that is an unusual location there to have a 5.7. There was also a 5.4 in Taiwan, a 5.1 in the Philippines, and as also of note, there was a 5.1 in Nepal. So the pressure is building. We're going to keep watching this. Remember, one of the signs in Matthew chapter 24 and in Luke 21 is there shall be earthquakes in diverse places, or in just kind of in each and every a lot of places they're not normally at, as older fault lines start to wake up. So we're watching that, and literally as we see this daily, we're able to monitor this daily and how it correlates to biblical prophecy. Well, let's jump right into a couple of articles here. And first, I want to kind of start in Israel. And just breaking news, and this is from the AP News today, is we've talked about the Israeli elections. And last week I mentioned that the deadline was coming quickly for the parties to form for the new elections that are coming up on March 3rd. Well, now, just breaking news is that the Israel Arab parties split. And so what this means is that in the previous election, you had 4 Arab parties for the government of Israel that formed an alliance. And so what happened was these 4 Arab parties actually gained 15 seats in the Knesset. Well, what happens is they split, and the 3 of them are going to still run together, but the 4th one, which was called the United Arab List, is going to basically strike out. I mean, they're going to be solo. They're going to strike out. Well, what happens is, first I'll say the disagreement between these parties was really a lot over the Palestinian Authority's leader Abbas not meeting with Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and kind of trying to work out their agreement. So there was a faction here that wanted it to happen and didn't want it to happen, so they split. Well, what happens when they split is they lost more of their influence. And so that actually gives a positive back to Benjamin Netanyahu, who will once again run again on March 3rd. So more to come on that, but as you can see, it's, Benjamin Netanyahu, this is really a small victory for him, just kind of moving forward. And then, we talked about coronavirus a lot in Israel, and now this is kind of breaking news here from the BuzzFeedNews.com, and it states that Israel is now the first country to curb the pandemic where vaccinations are starting to work. When we start to see these types of things, remember, I've mentioned this earlier on an earlier newscast, but I will also say this again. We're watching Israel and how they react with so many people becoming vaccinated because they have a lesser population. So we really want to take that and then apply that to bigger countries throughout the world. And as we start to see positive movements with Israel curbing the virus, one of the things that we're going to do is take that momentum, and then it will start to be applied across different countries of the world. And when you start to see these things, be on the lookout, because this is very, very important, because when we can take this and take what Israel is doing, and as Israel is going to bless the world and help out, then this is going to be very, very important moving forward. Well, also in Israel from the coronavirus, the government's been in lockdown lately. And so the government, this is from the Jerusalem Post, just presented a 3-stage lockdown exit plan. So this is very, very important. Okay, so the 3 phases, all right, they include a vaccination rate, the number of serious patients, but not of new daily cases. And this was introduced by the health ministry on Thursday. Okay, so right now, as of right now, the Israeli lockdown is set to end Friday at 7 a.m. And so the process is they're going to remove movement restrictions first, and then some workplaces then can open, basically, and then the younger children will then be able to go back to school. And then what's going to happen after this is, as these goals start to move, then you're going to have what's really different objectives or different goals that are going to be reached, in which the second phase is kind of, they're calling it purple ribbon standards. And so people that have their vaccines in both shots, they're going to start getting their restrictions lifted off. And then what's going to happen is that even in 2 weeks, Israel is hoping to achieve the goal of 90% of the people over 50 vaccinated. So very, very good news here. And, when you start to see this, then, hey, positive results are happening. So, and then as also right parallel in this news, and this is from the Times of Israel that I wanted to point out, is, okay, so you have Israel making waves here with the vaccine. So now what happens is you want to start opening up that economy and the economic gains of this and harness that motivation globally. So now Israel and Greece said that to start negotiating a travel corridor for the vaccinated. The Greece Prime Minister is reportedly set to visit Jerusalem next week. That would allow unrestricted movement between the two countries. You're going to notice that you're going to start to see more of this. You're going to start to see where more people in countries that say, if you've been vaccinated and you've been vaccinated, you can travel. That is going to come more and more. So pay attention to that, because when you start to see these things, notice that the next thing really is, how are people going to show their proof of vaccination globally? Look for some talk to be kind of moving into that stage, because if someone's in Greece and they show up in Israel, they might have to show proof to an Israeli government official or some sort of police official, whoever it may be, or even the border agents there, in which in the U.S. we have them as custom agents. They're going to have to show proof that they've been vaccinated. And it's going to actually have to be something that's going to be where you can't easily be duplicated. In other words, that there has to be a protection against fraud. Now, you might say, well, what does this mean as far as kind of the end times? Well, you'll notice, and I'll jump back into Matthew here, chapter 24, and so we're going to talk about verse 38, okay? And this is kind of the day and hour that no man knows, but only the Father in heaven. But in verse 38, for at the days that they were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So then you start talking about 2 are in the field, 1 are taken. 2 women are grinding at the mill, 1 is taken. And then in verse 42, watch therefore, for ye know not what hour the Lord doth come. In that, you can clearly see that the economy is open. You can clearly see that to some extent, 2 women are grinding at the mill. To some extent, 2 are in the field and 1 is taken. But people will also be eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage. So when you see that, you can see that when the Lord returns, that not everyone's shut up in their homes. So that, I think that's very, very important as we see that, actually taking the Bible literally for what it says. And kind of a little update on the Iran Nuclear Deal. So Iran, and you might have remembered last week, and if you're new to this channel and this is the first time you've watched this channel, I try to provide a weekly update at least once or twice a week on this Iran nuclear deal, because we're going to start to see a lot of action on this moving forward. And now this is from the Times of Israel. Iran may reverse banning nukes if Israel-U.S. act dangerously. Or basically if they re-implement the deal as is. So former Iranian diplomat says the Islamic legal opinion issued in 2003 might be changed, and that's in air quotes, and Biden could be forced back into the nuclear deal with no preconditions. Remember when I reported last week where President Joe Biden and the staff said that they were looking for extra, let's just say, conditions upon Iran? Remember when Israel also came out and announced that, hey, Iran, they need this, this, and this, placed extra upon them before we're going to agree that this could be a good nuclear deal? Well, now Iran's pushing back, and they're pushing back through the media. They're pushing back through their sources to basically say, hey, this isn't going to work. This is not going to work for us, and we really need something different. So pay attention to this, because there's going to be more of a battle, basically kind of going back and forth. And even the U.S. Department spokesman Ned Price said yesterday that the U.S. and Iran are, in quotes, a long way from the return to the 2015 nuclear deal. One of the things that I think it's very good here is that Price also said the U.S. President Joe Biden has been very clear that if Iran comes back into full compliance with its obligations under the original deal, the United States would do the same, and then we would then use that as a platform to build a longer and stronger agreement that also addresses other areas of concern. You know, here as we see this, we're seeing two different sides. We're seeing two sides with two extremes, and really there's no areas of compromise here. So as you can see, the tensions are rising with this, and this is also evident by just a couple of days ago, Iran just shooting a ballistic missile as a test, just to kind of show the world as a show of force, if you will. And then also kind of talking about Joe Biden and his delegations and things. President Joe Biden announced today, this is also from the Times of Israel, that the U.S. will end support for a 5-year led Saudi Arabia military offensive in Yemen. Now, you might say, well, why is this important? Well, let's jump into Ezekiel 38 here. And I want to show you why this is important. Is when we start talking about Ezekiel 38, and I mentioned this previously before, but I want to share it with you again, is that the Ezekiel 38 people that come on the nation of Israel are Gog and Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, Garma and Togarma, and all their bands, and the many people with thee. You know, Saudi Arabia is actually, they're listed a little bit further down, in which there's Sheba and Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish and all the young lions thereof. Tarshish is more of the United Kingdom or Great Britain. The young lions, this is where it actually could reference the United States. This is not very certain. That's just a common biblical theological opinion on the translations, and as many Bible scholars tend to agree, this is where the United States is mentioned. But all they say after this war is, art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey, to carry away silver and gold, and to take away cattle and goods, to take a great spoil? You see, this is an economic war. This is a war in which the economies are failing for the invading countries, that they need a spoil. So what does that mean? That means Israel is flourishing. Israel is booming. Israel has the silver and the gold and the cattle and the goods, right? That is worthy and that is really substantial enough for these countries to invade the nation of Israel. And, one of the things that I've always thought was kind of neat is God says in verse 4 of chapter 38, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth with all thine army, horses and horsemen. God is going to put hooks in their jaws to bring them to the Middle East, And what is that? The large oil deposits that have been found near the Golan Heights and things like that are on the kind of the north western side of Israel, and mainly through the northern area there, in which they can't even count how many barrels of oil are there, which also brought these countries into Syria there as well. So something that's very, very important to look at that as well. Well, then also real quickly here, I want to share with you a locust update. And this is from FAO.com, which is the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. And now numerous immature swarms persist in southern Ethiopia and Kenya. There has been increased swarm movement in Oromia. And so when you see this, the swarms are now moving into northern Ethiopia and continue to reach the Red Sea coast. When you see that swarms now could reach eastern Uganda and southeastern South Sudan, they're spreading all over. And in fact, what you're seeing is a lot of these areas, we talk about Ethiopia a lot on Ezekiel 38, and Ethiopia and even Libya, they want to come and invade Israel for this economic gain. Well, what contributes to Ethiopia being in a harsh economic climate? The locusts. That's why we monitor the locusts. That's why we talk about the locusts in biblical prophecy. So I really hope that you can kind of see that as well. And so lots of news coming out from a biblical perspective. Once again, we're watching the earthquakes. We're watching really what's happening. And as you can see, even right now, there's been a 2.5 earthquake in Nevada and a 2.9 in Colorado. So something that's very, very important we're going to kind of watch. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this news update today. I hope that you can see that we are on the cusp of major events happening with Iran, with Saudi Arabia, with Ethiopia, with even Russia, as we talked about with the political unrest there. Kind of in the United States, there's now the tensions are rising everywhere. And I want to leave you today, and we're going to go into Luke chapter 21, and I want to leave you today with a thought that something that's going to be kind of very, very important, and beginning in verse 28 for Luke chapter 21. And when you see these things begin to come to pass, these things meaning the signs of the tribulation, the signs of the end time, the hope here that is with us all, then look up, lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Our redemption is coming. Jesus Christ is coming back for his church. Are you ready? Are you ready? And would you be willing to answer that call today if the Lord called you home? Could you honestly say, Jesus, I am ready. I am confident that I would go with you. Take me home today. Well, it is my prayer and it is my hope that today you would be willing and be comfortable if Jesus called you home to spend eternity with him. Now, if you haven't, I'm going to share how you can do that. If you admit that you're a sinner, admit that you can't get to heaven by yourself. For in Ephesians, it tells us that no man shall boast of his works, because it is the finished work of the cross that's already been done. If you realize that you're not perfect, no man has ever been perfect that's walked the face of this earth other than Jesus Christ, who was fully man, but also fully God. And you must believe on Jesus Christ. You must believe that he is the Son of God, that he died on the cross, was buried, and was resurrected on the third day. And he then got the keys of death and hell for each and every person. There are over hundreds of documented cases of seeing Jesus after his resurrection. Think about that. Hundreds. And then the C part. We've got admit, we've got believe, and then we've got confess. Confess. It's as simple as, God, I know that I'm a sinner. I confess all my sins to you. I lay them down at the foot of the cross. Father, I place my hope and my faith in Jesus Christ and on the finished work. Father, reveal yourself to me. May your Holy Spirit come into me, Father. Renew me, renew my mind, renew my body, renew my soul. And I confess my sins and ask for the forgiveness of all my sins, as well as forgive those who've sinned against me. It is that simple. The gospel, and many people try to portray the gospel as works. Many people try to portray the gospel as you do this, or you say so many Hail Marys and you're fine, or if you do this, this, and this, and you backslide, you got to do this, this, and this again. No. Jesus clearly says that when we come to him and when we trust on him and when we admit, believe, and confess to him truly in our hearts, that no man, no entity, no one ever can pluck us from his hand. That is his promise. That is who he is. That is the character and the love of God in which he died for you and he died for me. Well, I hope that this brings you confidence and brings you reassurance that the Lord Jesus is returning and coming to get us very soon. For as in Luke 21:28 says, when these things begin to come to pass, look up, for your redemption draweth nigh. Well, once again, this is Brother Wayne from Alabama, and my time is up, and I thank you for yours. And Lord willing, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.